My wife told her mother, "I'm divorcing him. I can't live on his pathetic salary." I agreed to all her terms. A month later, her lawyer called her, his voice shaking. "Why didn't you tell me about this? Look, I need you to understand something right off the bat. I wasn't lurking around corners like some creepy husband in a Lifetime movie, waiting to catch my wife doing something scandalous. I wasn't pressed up against the wall with a glass to my ear. And I definitely wasn't hiding behind curtains like a discount private investigator who couldn't afford actual surveillance equipment. No, I was doing what I do best, fixing stuff that nobody else in this house seemed to notice was broken. That annoying squeak on the kitchen door had been driving me absolutely insane for 2 weeks straight. The kind of sound that drills into your skull at 3 o'clock in the morning when you're trying to grab water. And suddenly the whole house knows about it because that hinge decided to scream like a dying pterodactyl. So there I was, Thursday evening, toolbox in hand, WD-40 at the ready, doing the Lord's work on a door hinge that clearly hadn't seen maintenance since the Clinton administration. I had my screwdriver wedged into the top hinge, carefully working the pin loose while mentally calculating whether I needed to replace the whole thing or just lubricate it. When I heard my wife Sabrina's voice float through from the kitchen with that particular tone she uses when she's had exactly 2.5 glasses of Chardonnay and feels like the whole world owes her a Netflix special. You know that voice, the one that's just a little too loud, a little too confident, the kind that makes you wonder if she forgot other people have ears. And then, like a grenade rolling across a tile floor, she dropped it. "I'm divorcing him, Mom. I seriously can't live on his pathetic salary anymore. I'm done pretending I'm okay with this mediocre life." I froze. Not in the dramatic movie way where everything goes slow motion and sad piano music starts playing. More like the way you freeze when you accidentally step on a Lego in the dark and your brain needs a second to process the audacity of the pain. My hand was still on the screwdriver. My body was still crouched by that door, but my entire mental operating system just blue-screened and needed to reboot. Did she really just say that about me? About my salary? The same salary that paid for the kitchen renovation she's currently standing and sipping wine that I bought talking to her mother on the phone plan that's under my name? Her mother, Lorraine. And oh boy, we need to talk about Lorraine, responded with the enthusiasm of a villain who just found out the hero's weakness. "Good for you, sweetheart. You've been too patient with him. Get everything you can in the divorce. That man is too soft to fight back anyway. He'll probably just roll over and let you have it all." She said this like she was giving investment advice, like destroying someone's life was just a smart financial strategy you discuss over brunch. Too soft. Too soft. This woman who I rescued from a leaking roof during an actual thunderstorm 3 years ago while she sat inside praying over scented candles like divine intervention was going to patch her shingles, was calling me soft. I was up there in the rain slipping on wet tiles risking my life while she burned something called divine protection lavender sage and asked Jesus to cover her home. "Lady, Jesus sent me with a ladder and a tarp, and you're calling me soft." But here's the thing that really got me. The detail that made this whole situation shift from devastating to absolutely hilarious. They had no idea I could hear them. See, about 6 months ago, Sabrina wanted to open up the kitchen, which in home renovation terms means knocking down walls and pretending it makes your house look like something from HGTV instead of just making it echoey and weird. I spent 3 weekends demolishing that wall between the kitchen and the dining room, dealing with dust, permits, and her constantly changing her mind about where she wanted the opening. I rebuilt that wall. I textured it. I painted it. I made it look like it had been there since the house was built. And in the process of doing that, I learned something very valuable. Sound travels through that opening like it's got a direct highway into the dining room. Every word spoken in that kitchen might as well be broadcast on stadium speakers. But nobody thinks about acoustics when they're too busy picking out cabinet hardware. So there I was, crouched by a door with a screwdriver in my hand, listening to my wife and her mother plot my financial destruction with the casualness of people discussing what to order for dinner. Sabrina laughed. Actually laughed and said he won't even see it coming. He's so busy being the nice guy and fixing things that he doesn't pay attention to what actually matters. I've already talked to a lawyer, Mom. We're going to take him for everything. The way she said nice guy made it sound like a terminal disease, like being decent was somehow the stupidest thing a person could be. Lorraine cackled, and I mean actually cackled like she was stirring a cauldron, and replied, "That's my girl. You deserve a real life, not this starter marriage nonsense. Get the house. Get alimony and find yourself a real man with a real career. A real career. I'm a mechanical engineer. I design systems that keep buildings from collapsing and machines from exploding. But apparently that's not real enough because I don't wear a suit to work. And my office doesn't have a view of the city skyline. I fix problems. I build things. I make sure stuff works. But in Sabrina's new worldview, influenced heavily by her friends who married investment bankers and guys who describe themselves as entrepreneurs, even though they just sell supplements on Instagram, I'm basically a caveman with a wrench. I should have burst through that kitchen door right then and there, toolbox in hand, ready to confront them with the righteous fury of a man who just discovered his wife thinks he's a walking ATM with a disappointing balance. I should have demanded answers. Asked her how long she'd been planning this. Made her look me in the eye while she explained how the man who literally built half of this house wasn't good enough for her anymore. But I didn't. You know why? Because I'm not soft. I'm strategic. There's a difference. And Lorraine's about to learn it the hard way. Instead, I quietly finished fixing that hinge, packed up my toolbox with the calm precision of a surgeon closing up after a successful operation, and walked out of that dining room without making a single sound. I went upstairs, sat on the edge of our bed. Well, I guess it was about to become just the bed. And I didn't scream, didn't punch walls, didn't do any of that dramatic stuff that feels good in the moment, but solves exactly nothing. No, I did something much more dangerous. I started thinking. I started remembering every document I'd ever signed, every asset we owned, every legal structure I'd put in place over the years because I'm the kind of guy who actually reads the fine print and plans ahead. You know, the boring stuff that soft guys do while their wives are busy not appreciating them. See, Sabrina thinks I'm too polite to fight, too passive to make waves, too nice to protect myself. She's about to discover that quiet doesn't mean weak. It just means I'm the kind of person who plans the whole chess game while everyone else is still arguing about which piece is the horse. I heard every single word they said, every dismissive laugh, every cruel joke about my pathetic life. And I absorbed it all like a sponge. Not because it hurt me. Though, let's be real, it absolutely did, but because information is power, and they just handed me enough ammunition to win a war they didn't even know they'd started. I didn't sleep much that night. Sabrina came to bed around midnight, smelling like wine and betrayal, and kissed me on the forehead like she'd just spent the evening watching Netflix instead of planning my financial execution. She whispered good night with the kind of fake sweetness that would make artificial sugar jealous. And I said it back because I'm polite like that. Soft even. And while she fell asleep next to me, probably dreaming about her new life funded by my pathetic salary, I was wide awake, staring at the ceiling, mentally organizing every piece of evidence I'd need, every legal maneuver I could make, every single way I could turn this disaster into the most educational experience of her life. Tomorrow, I'd start building my case. Tonight, I just smiled in the dark and thought about how satisfying it's going to be when the woman who called me too soft to fight realizes she just picked a fight with the wrong engineer. Because soft men don't plot, we plan. And baby, I've got blueprints. Here's the thing that really gets me. The part that keeps me up at night staring at the ceiling like I'm trying to find answers in the texture patterns. We weren't always like this. I know that sounds like something every divorced guy says right before he starts crying into his beer at a depressing bar, but I'm serious. There was actually a time, not even that long ago, when Sabrina looked at me like I was the answer to every question she'd ever had about what she wanted in life. She used to call me my rock, and she didn't say it ironically or as some kind of joke she shared with her friends later. She meant it. She'd introduce me to people at parties and say, "This is my husband. He's my rock." With this proud smile like she'd won some kind of lottery by landing a guy who showed up when he said he would and actually knew how to fix things without calling a professional. Now, apparently, I've been downgraded from rock to pebble, specifically the annoying kind that gets stuck in your shoe during a hike and ruins your whole day. The transformation didn't happen overnight like some dramatic movie reveal where the music gets ominous and you suddenly realize your partner is actually evil. No. This was more like watching a plant die slowly because you forgot to water it. Except in this case, I was the one doing all the watering and the plant just decided it wanted to be in a fancier pot in someone else's house. Metaphors aside, let me paint you a picture of what we used to be back when I was still worth loving and my toolbox was considered charming instead of embarrassing. 3 years ago, back when we'd only been married for about a year and everything still had that new relationship smell, Sabrina used to iron my shirts every Sunday evening while humming Sheeran songs. I'm talking the whole domestic fantasy. She'd set up the ironing board in the living room, put on one of those sappy playlists, and actually iron my work shirts with this little smile on her face like she was doing something meaningful. I'd watch her from the couch, usually pretending to read something, but really just observing this woman who seemed genuinely happy to be doing something nice for me. And I'd think, man, I really lucked out. She'd fold each shirt perfectly, hang them in my closet organized by color, and sometimes she'd spray them with this cologne she bought me because she said it made me smell like success and sandalwood, which I'm pretty sure was just marketing copy from the bottle, but I appreciated the sentiment. She used to say she loved my simple mechanical engineer energy, which at the time I thought was a compliment. She'd brag to her friends about how I could fix anything, how I understood how stuff worked, how I was the kind of guy who read instruction manuals for fun and actually enjoyed organizing the garage. Her friend Melissa once had a kitchen disaster, something with her garbage disposal that was making sounds like it was summoning demons. And Sabrina volunteered my services with this proud enthusiasm, like she was lending out a celebrity. I spent 2 hours at Melissa's house fixing her plumbing while Sabrina stood there telling everyone who'd listen that her husband was so handy and smart. And I felt like a superhero in cargo pants. Those were good days. Simple days. Days when being competent and reliable were apparently attractive qualities instead of whatever they are now. But then something shifted and I can pinpoint almost exactly when it happened. Her friend group started changing. Or maybe they didn't change and I just started noticing what they'd always been. Melissa married some hotshot corporate lawyer who wore those expensive suits that look uncomfortable but cost more than my car payment. Her other friend Ashley landed a guy who claimed to be a tech entrepreneur, which as far as I could tell meant he had money from somewhere, but nobody could really explain what he actually did all day besides post motivational quotes on LinkedIn. Then there was Vanessa, who married a doctor, specifically a dermatologist, who drove a Tesla and had strong opinions about wine regions. Suddenly, every girl's night out turned into a competition about whose husband was more successful, whose house was bigger, whose vacation photos made other people feel worse about their lives. And just like that, my toolbox went from sexy to sad. The same skills that used to make Sabrina proud started making her embarrassed. She stopped telling people what I did for work unless directly asked. And even then, she'd say it quickly like she was trying to get through an unpleasant obligation. He's an engineer, she'd say with the same enthusiasm most people use to describe their dental cleaning appointments. No more details, no more bragging about the projects I worked on. No more proud wife energy. Meanwhile, Ashley would go on for 20 minutes about her husband's latest business venture that sounded suspiciously like a pyramid scheme, and everyone would nod along like he was Elon Musk. I tried though. God, I really tried to keep up with this new version of what Sabrina wanted from life. I bought her flowers, the nice ones from the actual florist, not the gas station bouquets, because I'm not a complete idiot. I'd come home with roses or lilies or whatever the florist lady recommended that week and Sabrina would smile and say, "Thank you." But it was the kind of smile you give when someone gives you a gift card to a restaurant you don't really like. Polite but hollow. What she actually wanted was a Range Rover. Not a practical car. Not something with good gas mileage, but specifically a Range Rover because apparently that's what Vanessa drove and now it was the minimum acceptable vehicle for someone who took themselves seriously. Her friends started taking these elaborate yacht trips. Well, I say yacht trips, but I'm pretty sure at least 2 of them were just large boats that got called yachts for Instagram purposes. They'd post pictures in matching white outfits drinking champagne on the deck, tagging each other with captions like "blessed and living our best lives." And Sabrina would scroll through these photos with the kind of longing usually reserved for people looking at pictures of puppies or pizza. Then she'd look at me sitting on our perfectly nice couch in our perfectly nice house. And I could see the disappointment radiating off her like heat from asphalt in July. I tried to lighten the mood, suggest we take a weekend trip somewhere fun. Maybe drive up the coast or visit that bed and breakfast she'd mentioned months ago, but it wasn't the same. I wasn't offering helicopter rides to private islands, so why even bother? The breaking point for me, the moment when I realized we'd crossed some invisible line we couldn't walk back from, was when I got genuinely excited about finding cheap gas. I know how that sounds. I know it makes me sound like the most boring person alive, like someone whose personality got replaced with a spreadsheet, but hear me out. I've been tracking gas prices on this app, and I found a station that was 30 cents cheaper per gallon than everywhere else. 30 cents. Do you know how much money that saves over time? So, I came home actually excited to share this news and I told Sabrina about it like I discovered buried treasure. I might have even done a little celebratory gesture with my hands, which in retrospect was a mistake. She looked at me like I just told her I enjoyed watching paint dry as a hobby. Just stared at me with this expression that somehow conveyed both pity and disgust, which is impressive when you think about it. That's a complex emotional range to hit simultaneously. Then she said, and I quote, "That's great, honey." In the same tone you'd use to encourage a child who just showed you a really ugly drawing they made at school. Ashley had just told her about a last-minute trip to Bali that her husband surprised her with, and I was over here throwing a parade because I'd found affordable fuel. The contrast wasn't lost on either of us. I should have seen it coming. All the signs were there, glowing like neon in the dark, but I kept telling myself we were just going through a phase. Couples go through phases, right? That's what all the articles and advice columns say. You hit rough patches, you work through them, You come out stronger on the other side with a renewed appreciation for each other and maybe some couples therapy techniques you learned from a book with a calming cover. I thought if I just kept being myself, reliable, steady, present, she'd remember why she married me in the first place. I thought the whole my rock thing was still valid, that she still valued stability and dependability and someone who actually showed up every single day. But I'd become background noise in my own marriage, the human equivalent of elevator music. I was there technically making sounds, but nobody was really listening. She'd scroll through her phone during dinner, barely responding when I talked about my day. She stopped asking about my projects at work, stopped pretending to care about the technical challenges I was solving. Her eyes would glaze over the moment I started explaining anything, and I'd catch myself mid-sentence wondering why I was even bothering to finish the story. The irony is that my pathetic salary that she complained about to her mother was paying for everything she wanted. The house renovations she kept demanding. My salary. The new furniture she ordered because the old stuff wasn't sophisticated enough. My salary. The wine she drank while plotting my downfall. You guessed it. Funded by the same paycheck she found so disappointing. But none of that mattered because her friends' husbands made more, had more, posted more, and therefore were worth more as human beings according to whatever twisted metric she was using to measure value. I smiled through all of it because therapy costs money and sarcasm is free. Every dismissive comment, every eye roll when I suggested something that didn't cost a fortune. Every time she compared me unfavorably to someone else's husband, I absorbed it with the patience of a saint or maybe just the delusion of someone who still thought love could survive being treated like a consolation prize. I made jokes, kept things light, pretended I didn't notice that the woman who used to iron my shirts now looked at me like I was an obstacle between her and the life she actually wanted. So yeah, we weren't always like this. We used to be good, or at least I thought we were good, which might be the saddest part of all this. Somewhere between my rock and my regret, I became the villain in a story I didn't even know I was part of. And the only crime I committed was staying exactly the same person she'd married while she decided that person wasn't enough anymore. You know that feeling when you're looking for something completely innocent, like a stapler or a phone charger, and you accidentally stumble across something that fundamentally changes your entire understanding of reality. That's basically what happened to me on a Thursday night that started out boring and ended with me questioning whether I actually knew the person I'd been sleeping next to for the past 4 years. I wasn't snooping, wasn't going through her stuff like some paranoid husband who watches too many true crime documentaries. I was literally just trying to print out a receipt for my taxes because apparently the IRS still lives in 1987 and thinks digital copies aren't real. So, I needed a physical piece of paper to prove I bought office supplies. I opened the printer drawer. You know that bottom drawer that nobody ever really organizes and just becomes a graveyard for random papers, dried out pens, and instruction manuals for electronics you don't own anymore. I was digging around looking for printer paper, moving aside old birthday cards, and what appeared to be a menu from a Chinese restaurant that definitely doesn't exist anymore. When my hand hit a folder. Not just any folder, but one of those official-looking ones with the little tabs and everything. The kind that says, "I'm organized and I mean business." Naturally, I pulled it out because when you find a mysterious folder in your own house, you don't just ignore it and move on with your life like some kind of well-adjusted person with boundaries. I opened it. And they're printed in crisp black and white with the kind of formatting that suggested someone spent actual time on this. Was a document titled Divorce Strategy. Not thoughts about our marriage or concerns to discuss or even reasons I'm unhappy. Nope. Straight to divorce strategy like this was a corporate presentation about quarterly earnings. I had to blink twice, literally close my eyes and open them again like a cartoon character who just saw something unbelievable because surely I was misreading this. Surely my wife didn't actually create a strategic planning document for dismantling our marriage with the same energy most people use to plan a vacation. But oh, she did. And it got so much better or worse, depending on your perspective and how much you enjoy watching your life implode in real time. This wasn't just a simple "I want a divorce" letter. This was a full-blown strategic assault plan with bullet points, subheadings, and what appeared to be a timeline of execution. I'm talking military-grade organization here. The kind of planning that would make a project manager weep with pride. At the top of the page in bold letters like a mission statement, it said, primary objectives: secure the house, maximize alimony payments, protect personal assets. Personal assets. She had personal assets she was protecting from me. Her husband, the guy who apparently was such a financial threat that she needed a defensive strategy. The bullet points were what really got me, though. She'd actually made a numbered list of tactical moves. Each one more calculated than the last. Number 1, ask for the house. He renovated it so he'll feel emotionally attached and won't want to fight. Okay, first of all, rude. Second of all, she's not wrong, which makes it even more rude. I did renovate that house. I spent weekends covered in drywall, dust, and paint, restructured the entire kitchen layout, fixed plumbing issues that the previous owner had ignored for probably a decade, and turned that place from a data disaster into something actually nice. But sure, use my own hard work and emotional investment against me. That's totally fair play in the game of marital destruction. Number 2 on her little list, demand alimony. Emphasize lifestyle maintained during marriage. Downplay earning potential. This one made me laugh. That bitter kind of laugh that comes out when you're too shocked to cry and too angry to scream. She was planning to pretend she couldn't support herself, that she'd somehow become dependent on my pathetic salary. Her words from the kitchen conversation, not mine, while simultaneously complaining that I didn't make enough money. So, which is it, Sabrina? Am I not making enough to satisfy your lifestyle dreams? Or am I making so much that you need to keep extracting it after we're divorced? Pick a lane. Number 3, and this is where it gets truly special. Don't mention his private fund. I froze when I read that line. She knew about the fund. Somehow, despite my very careful financial planning and my general assumption that she didn't pay attention to anything that didn't involve shopping or comparing our life to her friends' lives, she discovered the private investment fund I'd set up years ago. This wasn't some massive fortune or secret wealth. It was just money I'd saved and invested carefully over time. The financial equivalent of actually reading the terms and conditions and making smart decisions. But the fact that her strategy specifically said don't mention it meant she knew it existed and was planning to pretend she didn't. So I wouldn't think to protect it. But wait, there's more. Because apparently Sabrina had the dedication of a method actor preparing for the role of a lifetime. Number 4 on her list. And I need you to appreciate the absolute audacity of this said, practice crying for court appearances. Practice crying. She had scheduled actual rehearsal time for fake emotional breakdowns. This wasn't a spontaneous moment of sadness or genuine grief over a failing marriage. This was a performance piece. She was workshopping like she was preparing for Broadway. I imagined her standing in front of the bathroom mirror, trying out different crying styles, maybe timing how long she could hold a sub before it became obvious she was faking it. No, that one's too dramatic. Try the single tear rolling down the cheek. That's more sympathetic. Number 5, emphasize his lack of ambition and refusal to provide proper lifestyle. There it was in black and white. The narrative she was planning to sell to her lawyer, the judge, probably her friends, and anyone else who would listen. Never mind that I had a stable career, paid all our bills on time, and never once failed to provide anything she actually needed. The problem wasn't that I couldn't provide. It was that I couldn't provide at the same level as Ashley's tech bro husband or Vanessa's dermatologist. I wasn't refusing to give her a proper lifestyle. I was refusing to go into debt pretending to be wealthier than I was just to keep up with people who probably had their own financial problems hidden behind Instagram filters. The document went on for 3 pages. 3 full pages of strategic planning, complete with a section labeled Anticipated Responses and Counterarguments, where she'd literally predicted what I might say in my own defense and prepared rebuttals. It was like reading a chess strategy guide where I was the opponent and she'd already planned 15 moves ahead. There was a timeline suggesting the best month to file for divorce, apparently March, because tax season makes financial discussions easier. Notes about which lawyer to hire based on their aggressive reputation and high success rate, and even a section about how to handle telling mutual friends in a way that positioned her as the victim. I stood there in my home office holding this folder like it was radioactive, and I had this surreal moment where I wondered if I'd accidentally married a supervillain. This level of planning, this degree of calculated manipulation, this wasn't normal relationship dysfunction. This was Ocean's 11 meets divorce court, and I was apparently the casino she was planning to rob. The scariest part wasn't even the content of the plan. It was the handwriting in the margins. She'd made little notes to herself, reminders and encouragements like stay strong and you deserve better, and my personal favorite, he won't see this coming because he trusts you. She was right about that last part. I did trust her. Or at least I had trusted her up until approximately 5 minutes ago when I discovered she'd been treating our marriage like a heist movie where she was the mastermind and I was the oblivious security guard who leaves his post to get coffee at the critical moment. The betrayal wasn't just that she wanted a divorce. People fall out of love. Marriages end. I could have handled that like an adult if she'd just been honest about it. No, the betrayal was the premeditation, the cold calculation, the fact that she'd been smiling at me over breakfast while simultaneously plotting exactly how to destroy my financial stability and emotional well-being. I carefully put the document back exactly where I found it, made sure the folder was positioned the same way, even recreated the messy pile of random papers on top of it so she wouldn't know I'd seen it. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline rush you get when you suddenly realize you're in a fight you didn't know you'd entered and you need to start swinging or you're going to get knocked out. She thought I wouldn't notice. She genuinely believed that I was so oblivious, so trusting, so pathetically devoted that I'd never go looking in printer drawers or question why she suddenly seemed happier or notice that she was documenting our marriage like it was evidence for a trial. Here's what Sabrina didn't know about me, though. The things she'd fundamentally misunderstood about the man she married. Just because I'm quiet doesn't mean I'm stupid. Just because I'm patient doesn't mean I'm passive. And just because I spend our marriage being kind and accommodating doesn't mean I can't recognize when someone's treating me like a mark in a con game. She wanted to play strategic chess. Fine. But she forgot that engineers are literally trained to solve complex problems, anticipate failures, and build systems that can withstand unexpected stress. She brought a bull-ointed list to what was about to become a strategic war. And I was about to show her that amateurs plan operations while professionals plan campaigns. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't storm into the living room waving the document and demanding explanations like some dramatic hero in a soap opera. No, I did something much more dangerous. I went back to acting completely normal. I printed my tax receipt like that's what I'd come into the office to do. I walked out. I made dinner. I asked Sabrina about her day with the same casual interest I always had. She had no idea that while she was talking about some drama with her friend group, I was mentally running through everything I knew about asset protection, legal trusts, and exactly how to turn her own strategy against her. That night, lying in bed while she slept peacefully next to me, probably dreaming about her post-divorce life funded by my alimony payments, I stared at the ceiling and smiled in the dark. She'd said I wouldn't see it coming because I trusted her. But she was wrong about one critical thing. I had seen it coming the moment I overheard that kitchen conversation. This document just confirmed what I already knew and gave me the blueprint to her entire plan. She thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. But what she didn't realize was that I'd been playing chess this whole time. I was just polite enough to let her think she was winning. So I whispered to the darkness quiet enough that she couldn't hear me. Game on, Sabrina. Game on. You know what's funny about being underestimated? It gives you the kind of freedom that people who are taken seriously never get to experience. Once someone decides you're not a threat, they stop watching their back around you. They get sloppy. They say things they shouldn't say, leave evidence where they shouldn't leave it, and generally operate under the dangerous assumption that you're too dumb, too nice, or too checked out to notice what they're doing. Sabrina had clearly placed me in the harmless husband category, filed me away mentally somewhere between piece of furniture and loyal golden retriever, and that misconception was about to become the most expensive mistake of her life. So, I made a decision that probably would have surprised her if she'd been paying any attention. I turned invisible. Not literally, obviously, because that would require either superpowers or some serious scientific breakthrough that my mechanical engineering degree didn't cover. No, I became invisible in the way that people in relationships become invisible when the other person stops seeing them as a full human being. I became background noise, the husband equivalent of elevator music, just sort of there making ambient sounds while she went about her business of plotting my downfall. I stopped asking her about her day with any real interest. I stopped trying to engage her in meaningful conversations about our future, our problems, or anything that required her to acknowledge I had thoughts and feelings. I just smiled, nodded, and existed in the peripheral vision of her life. And let me tell you, it was liberally freeing in the most depressing way possible. When you stop caring what someone thinks of you, when you stop trying to win their approval or fix their perception of you, you suddenly have all this mental energy to redirect toward more productive activities. Like, for instance, building an absolutely bulletproof legal defense and counter strategy that would make her divorce strategy document look like a kindergartner's crayon drawing next to the Mona Lisa. The first thing I did was download an app on her phone, which by the way, she'd never bothered to password protect for me because why would she? I was just her harmless husband who fixed squeaky doors and got excited about gas prices. I wasn't a threat. The app was one of those wellness programs disguised as a hydration reminder because Sabrina was always on some new health kick that lasted approximately 3 days before she forgot about it and moved on to the next trending wellness fad. This particular app reminded you to drink water throughout the day with little notification pings and motivational messages like stay hydrated, stay healthy. Real wholesome stuff that nobody would ever suspect was actually sophisticated recording software. Here's the beauty of modern technology. It's gotten so advanced that you can basically carry a recording studio in your pocket. And if you're even moderately tech savvy, you can make that recording studio work for you in ways that would have required an entire van full of surveillance equipment 30 years ago. Every time Sabrina had a phone conversation, every time she met with her friends for a wine night, which was really just a strategy session for how to maximize their divorce settlements. Every time she rehearsed her courtroom tears in the bathroom, thinking she was alone, my phone was saving it in beautiful high-definition audio. She talked to her lawyer, a guy named Marcus, who sounded like he'd watched one too many episodes of Suits and thought being aggressive was a personality trait. I listened to her describe me as financially controlling despite the fact that she had full access to all our accounts and spent money whenever she wanted on whatever she wanted. She called me emotionally unavailable, which was particularly rich coming from someone who'd stopped having real conversations with me 6 months ago. She even told Marcus that I'd refused to let her pursue her career, which was creative fiction at its finest, considering she'd quit her marketing job 3 years ago because she said it was too stressful, and I'd supported that decision without question. The best part, though, the absolute chef's kiss moment that almost made me laugh out loud when I heard it, was when she practiced her crying for her friend Ashley. I'm not kidding. She actually called Ashley on speakerphone and said, "Okay, I'm going to practice my testimony about how hurt I am, and you tell me if it sounds believable." Then she proceeded to deliver this performance about how I'd crushed her dreams and made her feel small, complete with fake sobs that sounded like a cat coughing up a hairball. Ashley, being the supportive friend that she was, gave her notes, actual director's notes, maybe less sobbing, more quiet pain. Judges respond better to dignified suffering. I saved that recording with the kind of care most people reserve for their wedding photos. I labeled it Oscar nomination and tucked it away in a secure cloud folder that Sabrina didn't even know existed, along with about 30 other recordings of her plotting, scheming, and generally being the kind of person who deserves a Lifetime Achievement Award in duplicity. Every phone call with her mother where they discussed how to hide her inheritance from the divorce proceedings. Every conversation with Marcus where they strategized about making me look like a controlling monster. Every girls' night where her friends coached her on how to cry on command and which outfit would make her look most sympathetic in court. All of it saved, time-stamped, and ready to be used. Meanwhile, during the day, I maintained my cover as the oblivious husband so convincingly that I almost believed it myself. I went to work, came home, made dinner, watched TV, and acted like everything was completely normal. When Sabrina came home from her errands that I knew were actually meetings with her lawyer, I'd ask how her day was with the kind of mild interest you'd show a stranger in an elevator. She'd say fine with that dismissive tone she'd perfected, and I'd nod and go back to whatever I was pretending to be interested in on my laptop. She started getting bolder, more careless. She'd leave her laptop open with email exchanges with Marcus visible on the screen. She'd take phone calls in the next room, thinking the wall was enough privacy, not realizing that the same acoustic design that let me hear her kitchen conversation with her mother worked throughout the entire house. She'd go out for drinks with her friends and come home slightly tipsy, mumbling to herself about the plan and how she was so close to freedom. One night, she literally walked past me on the couch and said, "Soon I won't have to look at your face anymore." Under her breath, like I couldn't hear her. I just smiled and kept scrolling through my phone. But internally, I was thinking, "Oh, honey, the face you won't be looking at is your own reflection when you realize how badly you miscalculated." I started documenting everything, not just the recordings, but physical evidence, too. Every credit card statement showing her spending habits. Every text message where she complained to her friends about our poverty while posting photos of expensive brunches and designer handbags. Every social media post where she hinted at being in an unhappy marriage, carefully crafted to make her look like a victim while making me look like some kind of oppressive villain who was holding her back from her dreams. I screenshot everything, saved everything, organized everything into folders with the kind of meticulous attention to detail that would make a librarian weep with joy. Her friend Vanessa came over one afternoon for coffee, and I happened to be home working in my office. They sat in the kitchen, of course, they sat in the kitchen because apparently that had become Sabrina's war room, and talked about the divorce like it was already a done deal. Vanessa asked if she was worried about me fighting back, and Sabrina laughed. Actually laughed. She said, "He won't fight. He's too polite to make a scene. He'll probably just sign whatever I put in front of him because he's too soft to deal with conflict." I sat in my office listening through my own recording app and smiled. She thought politeness was weakness. She thought avoiding conflict meant being incapable of it. She'd fundamentally confused being nice with being stupid. And that confusion was going to cost her everything. Because here's the thing about actually nice people. The genuinely kind folks who go through life trying not to hurt others and treating people with respect. When you back them into a corner and attack them with the kind of calculated cruelty that Sabrina was displaying, they don't fight like people who are used to fighting. They fight like people who have nothing left to lose and unlimited creativity for solving problems. I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the hot explosive way I'd been when I first overheard her kitchen conversation. That anger had cooled into something much more dangerous, a cold, calculated determination to win. She wanted to play games. I'd show her what happens when you challenge an engineer to solve a problem. We literally get paid to find weaknesses in systems and fix them. And Sabrina's entire strategy was just a system full of exploitable weaknesses. She told her friend Marcus during one of their phone calls that I recorded with the dedication of a court stenographer. He doesn't even know about the trust. I never told him about the house structure and he's too dumb to check property records. That recording was particularly delicious because she was dead wrong on both counts. I knew exactly what the property structure was because I'd set it up. The house wasn't in our names. It was owned by a holding company I'd created years before we got married, back when I was being too careful and too paranoid. According to her, she lived in that house thinking it was marital property, thinking her name on the mortgage meant she had ownership, not understanding that the mortgage and the actual property title were two very different things. But I didn't correct her. I didn't drop hints or try to warn her that she was building her entire strategy on a foundation that didn't exist. I just let her keep talking, keep planning, keep revealing every card in her hand while I quietly stacked my own deck. She thought I was playing checkers while she played chess. But the truth was, I'd been playing three-dimensional chess this whole time, and she'd just been moving pieces around on a board that didn't matter. Every evening, I'd sit with her at dinner making small talk about nothing important. And she'd smile at me with this condescending patience, like she was counting down the days until she could finally be free of her boring husband and his pathetic salary. She'd check her phone constantly, probably texting Marcus or her friends about the latest developments in Operation Divorce, and I'd pretend not to notice or care. I'd do the dishes, clean up the kitchen, maybe fix something around the house that needed attention, playing the role of the beautiful husband who had no idea his world was about to implode. The best part was how confident she got. She started talking about her post-divorce plans right in front of me, not even bothering to be subtle anymore. She'd tell her friends on speakerphone about the renovations she wanted to do to her house, the furniture she was going to buy with her alimony, the trips she was planning to take once she was finally free. She described this whole fantasy life funded by my money, lived in my house, enabled by her successful exploitation of someone who'd done nothing but love and support her. And I'd just nod along, make appropriate noises of agreement, and think about how absolutely spectacular it was going to be when reality came crashing through her delusions like a wrecking ball through tissue paper. She wanted everything. She was about to get exactly what she deserved, which, spoiler alert, was absolutely nothing she was expecting. I gave her enough rope to hang herself with, and she was enthusiastically braiding it into a noose while thinking she was making a designer accessory. Every day she got more careless, more open about her plans, more convinced that I was too stupid and too passive to be a threat. And every day I collected more evidence, refined my counter-strategy, and waited for the perfect moment to reveal that the husband she thought was soft was actually made of something much harder, and that too polite to fight had just been code for smart enough to let you defeat yourself. The day finally arrived with all the ceremony of a funeral, which was fitting because our marriage was definitely dead and we were just here to make it official. Sabrina had scheduled the signing for a Tuesday afternoon at 2 o'clock, which I found oddly specific until I realized she'd probably consulted some article about the best time to ambush your husband with divorce papers. Or maybe her astrologer told her Mercury was in the right position for financial devastation. She'd been buzzing around the house all morning with this barely contained excitement like a kid on Christmas Eve who knows exactly what present they're getting and can't wait to rip it open. Her lawyer, Mr. Marcus Tanner, showed up 15 minutes early because apparently being punctual is how lawyers justify their hourly rates. He walked into our house. Well, technically my house, but we'll get to that. Wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment and a tie that screamed, "I win divorces for a living, and I'm very good at it." Everything about him was calculated to intimidate, from his overly firm handshake to the way he set his expensive leather briefcase on our dining table like he was claiming territory. He had this smug energy radiating off him, the kind of confidence that comes from winning too many cases against unprepared opponents who didn't see him coming. He looked at me like I was a particularly easy puzzle he was about to solve in record time. Gave me this patronizing smile and said, "Thank you for being reasonable about this process. It'll make everything so much smoother for everyone involved." Translation: thank you for being a doormat. I'm about to wipe my shoes on. I just nodded politely because at this point, I perfected the art of looking harmless while mentally planning someone's legal destruction. It's a skill, really. You smile. You agree. You let them think they've already won. And then you wait for the perfect moment to flip the board. Sabrina sat down across from me at the dining table we'd picked out together 3 years ago at some furniture store where she'd spent 2 hours debating between oak and walnut finishes. She was wearing this outfit that was clearly chosen for maximum. I'm the victim here. Impact. A simple dress, minimal makeup, hair pulled back in a way that said, "I'm too devastated to care about my appearance." Even though I knew she'd spent 45 minutes getting ready because I heard her blow dryer running. She had her sympathetic face on, the one she'd been practicing in the bathroom mirror. And when she looked at me, her eyes had this carefully crafted sadness that would have been Oscar-worthy if I didn't know it was completely fake. Marcus slid the divorce papers across the table with the kind of theatrical flair that suggested he'd done this exact move hundreds of times and probably practiced it in front of a mirror. The papers were thick, official-looking, the kind of document that weighs heavy in your hands because of what it represents. I could see sections highlighted in yellow, sticky tabs marking where I needed to sign, little arrows pointing to signature lines like they were worried I might miss them. At the top of the first page, in bold letters, it said, "Dissolution of marriage," which is such a cold, clinical way to describe the end of something that was supposed to last forever. Sabrina reached across the table and put her hand on mine in this gesture that was probably supposed to seem compassionate, but just felt condescending. "Thank you for not making this harder than it needs to be," she said. And her voice had this soft, grateful quality that made me want to laugh. She actually thought she was being gracious by allowing me to participate in my own financial execution without putting up a fight. I know this isn't easy for either of us, but I think we can both agree this is for the best. We've grown apart, and there's no point in dragging this out. I looked at her, really looked at her, and tried to remember when exactly this person I'd married had turned into someone I didn't recognize. Was it gradual? Was there a specific moment? Or had she always been this person, and I'd just been too blind to see it? But this wasn't the time for philosophical reflection about the nature of love and betrayal. This was the time to play my part perfectly. "You're right," I said, and I meant it in ways she couldn't possibly understand. "You deserve everything." I watched her face light up at those words, watched the little smile that played at the corners of her mouth as she interpreted my statement exactly the way she wanted to. She thought I meant everything I own. What I actually meant was everything that's about to happen to you. Funny how the same words can mean completely different things depending on who's listening. Marcus looked pleased, like I just made his job significantly easier by being the cooperative husband who wasn't going to waste his time with lengthy negotiations. He probably had another client scheduled right after this. Another marriage to dissolve, another person to financially dismantle. He pulled out his fancy pen, the kind that probably cost more than a week's worth of groceries, and clicked it with this authoritative snap. "Excellent. If you could just sign on each of the marked pages, we can get this finalized and move forward with the proceedings." I picked up my own pen, the same one I'd been using for years. Nothing fancy or expensive about it. Just a regular blue ballpoint that had signed mortgage documents, birthday cards, work contracts, and now apparently divorce papers. There was something poetic about using this ordinary pen for such an extraordinary moment, though the poetry was probably lost on everyone else in the room. I flipped through the pages, pretending to skim them, even though I'd already memorized every single clause, every single term, every single way Sabrina thought she was about to screw me over. The papers outlined everything she wanted. The house, alimony payments that would have kept me living in a cardboard box under a bridge, half of my retirement fund, even my car, because apparently hers wasn't reliable enough for her new single life. It was a masterpiece of legal theft, really. If she'd put this much effort into our actual marriage, we probably wouldn't be sitting here right now. But she'd saved all her creativity and strategic thinking for this moment, for this document that was supposed to represent her victory and my defeat. I signed each page with steady hands, not showing any emotion, not giving them the satisfaction of seeing me upset or angry or anything other than calm and accepting. Marcus collected the papers like they were treasure maps, sliding them back into his briefcase with the care of someone handling something valuable. Sabrina looked at me with this mixture of relief and triumph, probably thinking about all the ways she was going to spend my money once the divorce was finalized. "Thank you," she said again, and this time she actually sounded sincere. "I know you'll move on and be fine. You're good at adapting." That was her way of saying, "You're good at settling for less." But I let it slide because I was too busy thinking about what was coming next. They stood up. Marcus shook my hand again with that same condescending grip, and Sabrina gave me an awkward hug that felt like hugging a stranger who was trying to steal your wallet. As they walked toward the door, probably already planning their celebration lunch where they'd toast to her successful divorce strategy, I sat at that dining table and smiled to myself. I'd just signed those papers with the same pin I'd used 3 years ago to register the trust that secretly owned our house. The same pin I'd used to create the shell company that held all our major assets. The same pin that had protected me from exactly this scenario long before I ever thought I'd need protection. Sabrina thought she'd won. Marcus thought he'd earned his fee. And I sat there knowing that the real show hadn't even started yet. They wanted everything. Well, they were about to discover that everything was a lot less than they thought. And nothing was exactly what they deserved. The papers were signed, the performance was over, and the curtain was about to rise on Act 2, the part where reality comes knocking and nobody answers the door prepared. A week after the signing ceremony that Sabrina probably had marked on her calendar with little celebration emojis, she moved into what she now called her house with a kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for lottery winners or people who just found out they're getting a kidney transplant. I'd moved my stuff out into a modest apartment across town. Nothing fancy, just a basic 2-bedroom with functional appliances and neighbors who minded their own business. The kind of place that didn't scream success, but didn't whisper failure either. Perfectly designed to make Sabrina think I was struggling while she was thriving. Meanwhile, she descended upon that house like a decorator possessed by the ghost of every HGTV show ever made. The transformation started immediately, and I know this because I still had access to the security cameras I'd installed 2 years ago when we had that break-in scare in the neighborhood. Funny how she never thought to ask me to remove my access. Probably because in her mind I was already irrelevant, just a sad ex-husband who'd slunk away defeated. She had contractors in there within 48 hours, painting walls that didn't need painting and ripping out perfectly good fixtures because they didn't match her new aesthetic. I watched from my phone as she directed workers to paint the living room this aggressive shade of blush pink that looked like Pepto-Bismol had an identity crisis. The kitchen got new cabinet hardware, gold instead of the brushed nickel I installed because apparently gold was more luxurious, and she was done with my budget choices. Her mom, Lorraine, showed up on day 3 with a bottle of champagne that probably cost more than she should have spent. And the two of them had this whole celebration scene in the living room that would have been touching if it wasn't built on a foundation of complete delusion. I couldn't hear what they were saying through the camera feed, but I could see them toasting, laughing, Lorraine gesturing around the room like she was admiring a palace instead of a suburban 3-bedroom that was about to become a very expensive lesson in reading property documents. They looked so happy, so victorious, like they just conquered enemy territory instead of moving into a house that legally belonged to a shell company they didn't know existed. Sabrina went full influencer mode with the redecorating, posting everything on social media, like her life had suddenly become a lifestyle brand. She bought new furniture, a white sectional couch that looked like it would stain if you looked at it wrong, some abstract art pieces that probably cost a fortune and looked like something a kindergartner made during free time, and throw pillows that served no functional purpose except to be artfully arranged for photos. Every room got the Instagram treatment, strategic lighting, carefully placed plants that she'd definitely kill within a month, and those wooden signs with inspirational quotes like she believed she could, so she did. And new beginnings start here. The master bedroom, the same room where we'd slept together for 3 years, got completely purged of any evidence I'd ever existed. She replaced the bedding with something fluffy and white that looked impossible to keep clean, hung sheer curtains that let in too much morning light, and installed this ridiculous chandelier that was way too fancy for a suburban bedroom. She posted a photo of it with the caption "Finally living in my space, design my way," with about 15 hashtags including #FreshStart, #LivingLife, and my personal favorite #Freedom Feels Good. The comments section was full of her friends hyping her up, telling her she deserved this, calling her a queen. All of them completely unaware that they were celebrating a woman who was essentially redecorating a house she didn't own. She renamed it, too, because apparently just living there wasn't enough. It needed a rebrand. She ordered one of those custom signs for the front porch that said Sabrina's Sanctuary in that cursive font that every basic home decor enthusiast loves, a sanctuary. She turned my investment property into her personal sanctuary, complete with matching doormats and seasonal wreaths. She even started a home Instagram account separate from her personal one, calling it Sabrina Sanctuary, with a bio that read, "Creating my dream space, one room at a time, Sparkles house with garden to heartst." Her friends came over constantly those first 2 weeks, and I watched through the cameras as they had their wine nights and girls' brunches. All of them sitting on that overpriced white couch admiring what Sabrina had built for herself. Ashley brought over a housewarming gift, some expensive candles that probably smelled like financial irresponsibility. Vanessa showed up with flowers and spent an hour taking photos for her own Instagram because apparently being friends with someone who won a divorce was social media gold. They all acted like Sabrina had achieved something monumental instead of just signing papers that were about to backfire spectacularly. I sat in my modest apartment eating takeout Thai food and watching this circus unfold on my phone like it was the world's most expensive reality TV show. Every new piece of furniture she bought, every contractor she hired, every paint color she chose, it was all adding up on credit cards and loans that she thought she could afford because she was banking on alimony payments that were never going to materialize. She was spending money like someone who'd already won the lottery, not realizing the ticket was fake. The best part was her social media presence, which had transformed from occasional food photos and vacation pictures into a full-blown documentation of her journey to independence. She posted daily updates about her decorating decisions, Her morning routines in her space, inspirational quotes about leaving toxic situations, and choosing yourself. One post showed her sitting on that ridiculous white couch with a coffee mug that said, "Boss Babe." Captioned, "Sometimes you have to let go of what's holding you back to make room for what lifts you up." The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Her followers ate it up. The like counts were impressive, the comments were supportive, and everyone seemed genuinely happy for her transformation from trapped wife to independent woman. Nobody questioned how she could afford all these renovations on her supposedly non-existent income. Nobody wondered why she was living so lavishly if she just left a husband with a pathetic salary. They just celebrated with her, shared her posts, and contributed to the narrative that she was thriving. Meanwhile, I was just drinking tea, literally drinking tea, not spilling it yet, and watching this whole elaborate fantasy play out. I could have stopped it at any moment. Could have made a phone call to her or her lawyer and explained the situation, maybe saved her from this embarrassing performance. But where's the learning opportunity in that? Sometimes people need to build their castle completely before they realize they built it on quicksand. Sometimes the lesson needs to be spectacular to be effective. She even threw a housewarming party at the end of the second week, inviting all her friends and some people I didn't even recognize. I watched through the cameras as they mingled in the living room, admired the renovations, complimented her taste, and celebrated her new chapter. Lorraine made a toast. I could see her raising her glass in the camera frame, probably saying something about her daughter's strength and independence. Everyone cheered. Someone popped champagne. It was a whole production. And the entire time sitting in my apartment with my phone in one hand and documents in the other. I was just waiting for the right moment. Waiting for her to get comfortable in her victory. Waiting for the pink curtains to go up and the gold hardware to be installed and the Sabrina's Sanctuary sign to be mounted. Because the higher she climbed on this ladder of delusion, the more spectacular the fall was going to be. She thought she'd won the house. She thought she'd escaped. She thought she'd built herself a kingdom. And technically, she was right about one thing. It was about to become a sanctuary, just not hers. More like a sanctuary for lessons about reading legal documents and not underestimating quiet people who know how to use property law. The pink curtains went up on a Thursday. By Friday afternoon, I'd made the phone call. And just like that, the pin was pulled on the grenade she'd been sitting on this whole time, completely unaware it was about to explode. 2 days after the pink curtains went up, those god-awful pink curtains that looked like they belonged in a dollhouse designed by someone with no concept of subtlety. Sabrina got the phone call that would fundamentally alter her understanding of reality. I know the exact moment it happened because I was at work sitting in my office during lunch break eating jollof rice from this amazing Nigerian restaurant down the street that made everything with the perfect amount of spice. I've been having a pretty decent day, actually solved the design problem that had been bugging me all week. Got complimented by my boss on a project proposal and was generally just vibing in that peaceful space that comes from knowing you're about to ruin someone's entire month. My phone was sitting on my desk facing up and I watched as Sabrina's contact photo flashed across the screen. I didn't answer. Not yet. Let her simmer a bit, I thought, taking another bite of rice. The phone stopped ringing, was silent for maybe 30 seconds, then started up again. Still didn't answer. This was too delicious to rush. By the third call, which came approximately 45 seconds after the second one ended, I figured I'd let her suffer enough and picked up, putting on my most casual, unbothered voice. "Hey, what's up?" I said, like I was just answering a normal call from someone I used to know instead of the woman who tried to financially destroy me. What came through the phone can only be described as a primal scream wrapped in words. "What the hell did you do?" She wasn't asking a question. She was making an accusation, demanding an explanation, and having a complete breakdown all in one breath. Her voice had that particular quality that comes from crying and yelling simultaneously. That ugly cry voice that's all nasal and broken and completely devoid of the composed, strategic persona she'd been maintaining. I took another bite of rice, chewed it slowly, swallowed. "I'm going to need you to be more specific, Sabrina. What are we talking about here? The house?" She shrieked. And I had to pull the phone away from my ear because she was hitting decibel levels that could probably shatter glass. "The trust. The company. What did you do?" So Marcus had finally done his due diligence. Better late than never, I suppose, though never would have been funnier from my perspective. "I didn't do anything," I said calmly, deliberately keeping my tone as level and unbothered as possible because nothing makes an angry person angrier than someone being calm when they're losing it. "I just signed the papers like you asked. Marcus just called me." She was hyperventilating now, words coming out and gasps between sobs. He said, "The house isn't in your name," he said. "It belongs to some company called Torx Holdings." He said, "I signed papers as a tenant." "What does that mean?" What did you do? I set down my fork, leaned back in my office chair, and smiled at the ceiling. This was it. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The payoff for weeks of playing dumb and letting her think she'd won. Trex Holdings is a shell company I created 6 years ago before we even got married. The house is owned by that company, which is controlled by a trust. Your name was never on the actual property title, just the mortgage agreement. You were basically renting from my company this whole time. The silence that followed was magnificent. Not actual silence because I could hear her breathing in that rapid panicked way people breathe when their entire world is collapsing, but silence in terms of words. Her brain was clearly trying to process information that didn't fit into the narrative sheet constructed. Like trying to force a square peg through a round hole, except the peg was made of lies and the hole was reality. You can't. That's illegal. She finally sputtered. You tricked me. You had assets. Actually, I didn't hide anything. The information was publicly available in property records. You just never bothered to check because you assumed you knew everything. I was enjoying this way too much. And I'm not even sorry about it. And it's not illegal to own property through a company. Lots of people do it for asset protection. I just happened to set it up before I knew I'd need protection from my own wife. She was full on sobbing. Now, that ugly crying that comes from realizing you've been outsmarted by someone you thought was stupid. This isn't fair. I lived in that house. I decorated it. I made it a home. With my money, I added helpfully on my property while planning to take everything from me. Yeah, that must be really disappointing for you. You can't do this to me. Her voice had gone from angry to desperate. That pleading tone people use when they realize they're screwed and are trying to appeal to emotions that stopped existing weeks ago. I have nowhere to go. I spent money on renovations. I had contractors. The furniture sounds like a you problem, I said, and I meant it. You should have read the documents more carefully before you signed them. But hey, look on the bright side. You got really good at practicing crying, so at least all that rehearsal is paying off now. I hate you. She screamed. And then there was a crash in the background like she'd thrown something. You're a monster. You manipulated everything. No, Sabrina, you manipulated everything. I just didn't fall for it. I kept my voice steady, refusing to match her energy because staying calm was the ultimate power move. You wanted to take my house, my money, my future, all because I wasn't rich enough for your Instagram fantasy life. You practiced fake tears to manipulate a judge. You plotted with your mother about how to destroy me financially. You called me soft, pathetic, not a real man. So, excuse me if I don't feel particularly sympathetic that your evil plan backfired. She was making these weird choking sounds now, trying to form words, but failing because rage and devastation were short-circuiting her brain. I heard Lorraine's voice in the background, muffled but distinct, saying something like, "What's wrong? What happened?" And I almost felt bad for Lorraine. Almost. But then I remembered her sitting in that kitchen telling her daughter to take me for everything, calling me too soft to fight, and the sympathy evaporated. You wouldn't do this to someone you once loved. Sabrina finally managed to say, pulling out the guilt card like it was going to work on someone she'd spent months treating like garbage. I laughed. Actually laughed. You're absolutely right. I wouldn't do this to someone I once loved. Luckily, I stopped loving you the moment I heard you and your mother plotting my destruction in our kitchen. That was months ago, by the way. I've had a lot of time to process my feelings and prepare my response. This isn't over, she threatened. But her voice had lost all its power. She sounded defeated, broken, nothing like the confident woman who'd slid divorce papers across the table with that victory smile. Oh, it's definitely over, I said. The divorce is finalized. The house is mine. You have no legal claim to anything. Marcus knows this now. That's why he called you freaking out, because he realized he based his entire strategy on information you gave him that was completely wrong. You played yourself, Sabrina. I just watched. She was crying so hard now that I could barely understand what she was saying. Something about lawyers and fighting this and how I'd regret it. But I was done with the conversation. I'd said what needed to be said. Delivered the reality check she'd been avoiding. And now I had jollof rice getting cold on my desk. Hey Sabrina, I said, cutting off her rant mid-sentence. Remember when you said I was too polite to fight? How's that working out for you? And then I hung up. Just press the end called button mid-breakdown. Cutting off her sob with the digital finality of a phone disconnecting. My screen went black, showing my reflection, and I was smiling. Not a cruel smile, not an evil villain smile, just the satisfied smile of someone who'd just won a game they never wanted to play but played anyway and dominated completely. I picked up my fork, took another bite of jollof rice, and thought about how quiet victories taste better than any meal ever could. She wanted drama, wanted a big confrontation, wanted me to feel bad or guilty or conflicted, but I just felt relief. Relief that I'd never have to deal with her manipulation again. Relief that justice for once actually showed up on time. My phone buzzed with a text. It was from her. Multiple texts actually coming in rapid succession. All caps. Lots of exclamation points. The digital equivalent of a breakdown. I didn't read them. Just silenced her number and went back to my lunch. Because some conversations deserve to end mid-sentence, and some people deserve to scream into the void where nobody's listening anymore. Sabrina's first instinct after realizing she'd been completely outmaneuvered wasn't to quietly accept defeat and learn from her mistakes like a mature adult. No, that would have required self-awareness and humility, two qualities she'd apparently never developed. Instead, she did what every modern person does when reality doesn't cooperate with their narrative. She took to social media to play the victim. Within hours of our phone call, her Instagram and Facebook accounts erupted with posts that would have made a soap opera writer say, "Tone it down a bit." The first post appeared around dinner time. A black and white photo of her sitting on that expensive white couch looking contemplative and sad, staring off into the distance like she was in a perfume commercial for a fragrance called betrayal. The caption read, "Sometimes the people you trust most are the ones who hurt you deepest. Never trust a man who smiles while you cry. Lessons learned the hard way. Broken heart # betrayed # trust issues. # stronger than Thanover." The comments section immediately filled up with her friends offering support, posting heart emojis, and "you deserve better" queen messages. All of them completely unaware of the actual story. I watched this unfold from my apartment with the kind of detached amusement you get from watching a movie where you already know the ending. She was trying to control the narrative, paint herself as the wounded party, the innocent victim of a conniving husband who'd somehow wronged her. Ashley commented, "He never deserved you anyway, babe." And Vanessa added, "Men are trash. You're going to get through this." Even Lorraine joined in with, "My daughter is a survivor." Which was particularly rich coming from someone who'd actively encouraged the whole scheme. For about 6 hours, it worked. Her post got hundreds of likes, dozens of supportive comments, shares from friends who thought they were supporting someone going through a tough divorce. She posted a few more in quick succession, inspirational quotes about Phoenix rising from ashes, photos of herself looking brave and resilient, even a video of her doing yoga in the living room with a caption about finding inner peace despite chaos. It was a whole PR campaign designed to make her look sympathetic and me look like a monster. But here's the thing about trying to rewrite history in the age of technology. Someone always has receipts. And I had recordings, lots of them. Particularly one very special recording that I'd been saving for exactly this kind of situation. The one where she practiced her fake crying with Ashley, complete with director's notes about making it more dignified suffering instead of ugly sobbing. I debated whether to release it, whether stooping to her level was worth it. But then I remembered something important. Sometimes people need to face the consequences of their actions, and sometimes those consequences need to be public. I didn't post it directly. That would have been too obvious, too aggressive, and honestly beneath me. Instead, I sent it to exactly 3 people, Ashley, Vanessa, and one mutual friend named Derek, who I knew couldn't keep a secret if his life depended on it and loved drama more than he loved breathing. I sent it with no context, no explanation, just the audio file labeled Sabrina_practice session.mpp3 and let nature take its course. Derek posted it within an hour. Not the whole thing, just a carefully edited clip that captured the essence. Sabrina saying, "Okay, I'm going to practice my testimony about how hurt I am. You tell me if it sounds believable." Followed by her theatrical sobbing, followed by Ashley's critique about needing more quiet pain. He posted it on his Instagram story with the caption, "When you find out your friend's divorce drama is actually an audition performing arts hot beverage," and tagged Sabrina without thinking about the consequences because Derek lived for chaos. The story spread like wildfire through their social circle. Within 2 hours, I watched as the supportive comments on Sabrina's post started changing tone. The heart emojis disappeared. The "you go girl" messages stopped. Instead, people started asking questions. "Wait, is this real? Did you actually practice crying? So, you lied about everything." Some people deleted their supportive comments entirely, probably embarrassed they'd been fooled. Others left their comments up, but added new ones, expressing disappointment or confusion. Sabrina tried damage control, posting a long explanation about how the audio was taken out of context and manipulated, and that I was weaponizing private conversations to make her look bad. But the problem with claiming something is out of context is that people wanted the full context. And once they started digging, they found her other posts, the ones from a week ago celebrating her new house, showing off expensive furniture, living this luxurious lifestyle despite claiming in divorce papers that she had no income and needed alimony. The math wasn't made as the kids say, and people noticed. Ashley, to her credit, or maybe her shame, went completely silent on social media. Vanessa made a vague post about staying out of other people's business, which was basically an admission that she was abandoning ship. Other friends who'd been cheerleading Sabrina's divorce just days earlier suddenly had nothing to say. Their silence speaking louder than any supportive comment could have. The best comment came from someone I didn't even know, a friend of a friend who wrote, "So, let me get this straight. You practiced fake crying. Tried to take everything from your husband. Failed because he was smarter than you thought. And now you're mad that he didn't just let you rob him. Girl, that's not betrayal. That's consequences." It got 47 likes before Sabrina deleted the entire post, but screenshots live forever, and someone had already captured it and shared it in what I can only assume was a group chat dedicated to local drama. Her follower count started dropping. Not dramatically. This wasn't some influencer cancellation where she lost thousands overnight, but steadily, consistently, people quietly unfollowing or unfriending her as they realized they'd been supporting someone who wasn't quite the victim she'd claimed to be. Her carefully curated image of the strong, independent woman escaping a bad marriage crumbled under the weight of actual evidence that she'd been the architect of her own destruction. Lorraine predictably tried to defend her daughter with a Facebook post about lies and manipulation and how some men will do anything to avoid taking responsibility. But even that backfired when someone commented, "Ma'am, your daughter literally practiced fake crying. There's audio evidence." Lorraine deleted her post within an hour. And I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd stopped attending her bridge club because apparently Carol and Linda had some questions about her daughter's character that she couldn't answer. The social media meltdown culminated in Sabrina making her accounts private, which in the digital age is basically admitting defeat. She went from posting daily updates about her fabulous new life to complete radio silence, hiding behind privacy settings like someone who just realized the internet never forgets and screenshots are forever. Her Sabrina's Sanctuary Home Instagram account got deleted entirely. All those carefully staged photos of her pink paradise vanishing as if they'd never existed. I didn't gloat publicly. I didn't post my own version of events or try to further humiliate her. I just watched it all unfold with the quiet satisfaction of someone who didn't have to say a word because the truth spoke for itself. Sometimes karma doesn't need your help. It just needs a little audio file and a friend named Derek who can't resist good drama. My own social media remained unchanged. Still, just occasional photos of food, work projects, random thoughts about sports or movies. I didn't mention the divorce, didn't reference Sabrina, didn't play the victim or the victor. I just existed living my life while hers imploded in real time for everyone to see. Because here's the thing about being genuinely wrong versus playing the victim. When you're actually innocent, you don't need to convince anyone. The evidence speaks for itself. Meanwhile, I sat in my apartment scrolling through the aftermath of her social media disaster while drinking coffee and thinking about starting that podcast I joked about. Soft Men Don't Play had a nice ring to it. Maybe I'd make it about strategic thinking or property law or just general life lessons about not underestimating quiet people. The content practically wrote itself, and I had a feeling there'd be at least one very dedicated hate listener tuning in from behind her private account settings, learning lessons she should have learned months ago. Exactly 1 month after the divorce papers were signed, because I believe in letting things marinate properly before serving them, eviction day arrived with all the ceremony of a bank foreclosure and none of the sympathy. I'd given Sabrina more than enough time to figure out her living situation, find a new place, come to terms with reality, or at least start packing. But according to my property manager, Linda, who'd been keeping me updated with the enthusiasm of someone who clearly loved drama, Sabrina had done none of those things. She was still living in that house like nothing had changed, like the pink curtains and gold cabinet hardware had somehow granted her squatter's rights. I showed up at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday, driving my regular car that Sabrina used to complain wasn't nice enough, wearing jeans and a button-down shirt because I didn't need a suit to reclaim my own property. Linda was already there, a professional woman in her 50s who'd been in property management for 20 years and had seen every kind of tenant drama imaginable. Next to her stood a locksmith named Joe, a guy who looked like he'd changed 1,000 locks and wasn't impressed by anyone's sob story anymore. The three of us stood on the porch under that ridiculous Sabrina's Sanctuary sign, and I have to admit, I took a moment to appreciate the irony before ringing the doorbell. Sabrina answered looking like she hadn't slept in days, which she probably hadn't. Her hair was in a messy bun that wasn't the intentional Instagram kind, more like the I've given up on life kind. She was wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt, no makeup, eyes red and puffy from what I assumed was a combination of crying and reality finally setting in. When she saw me standing there with Linda and Joe, Her face went through about 5 emotions in 2 seconds. Shock, anger, disbelief, fear, and finally resignation. "You can't do this," she said. But her voice had no fight left in it. It was the verbal equivalent of a white flag. A last-ditch attempt at resistance from someone who knew they'd already lost. "Actually, I can," I replied calmly, gesturing to Linda. "This is Linda, the property manager for Torex Holdings. You've been served eviction papers. You ignored them, and your 30 days are up. We're here to reclaim the property." The inside of the house hit me like a lavender-scented slap to the face. She'd really gone all out with the renovations, and walking through rooms I used to know was like touring someone else's Pinterest board come to life. The living room with its pink walls and white furniture. The kitchen with its unnecessary gold hardware. The bedroom with that absurd chandelier. All of it was there. A monument to expensive mistakes and poor financial planning. Sabrina followed us through the house like a ghost haunting her own life choices. Not saying much, occasionally starting sentences that died in her throat. She tried one last guilt trip as we stood in the living room, surrounded by furniture she'd bought with money she didn't have. "You wouldn't do this to someone you once loved," she said, recreating the same line from our phone call because apparently her script needed updating. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no residual affection, just a blank space where emotions used to be. "You're right," I said with a small smile. "I wouldn't do this to someone I once loved. Luckily, I stopped loving you months ago, right around the time you and your mother were planning my financial destruction over Chardonnay." Joe the locksmith started working on the front door. The sound of his drill cutting through the awkward silence. Linda was doing a walkthrough, documenting the unauthorized changes Sabrina had made to the property, taking photos of the pink walls and expensive fixtures that would all need to be addressed. Sabrina just stood there watching her sanctuary dissolve around her like cotton candy in the rain. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked. And for the first time since this whole thing started, she sounded genuinely lost instead of manipulative. "I don't know, Sabrina. Maybe your mom's place. The same kitchen where you planned all this," I suggested, not unkindly, just stating the obvious. "You had a month to figure this out. You chose to spend that time redecorating and posting on Instagram instead of apartment hunting again. That's a you problem." The locksmith finished with a satisfying click, holding up a new set of keys that Sabrina would never have copies of. Linda handed me the keys with a professional nod. The transfer of power complete and documented. The house was officially mine again, purged of the person who tried to steal it through manipulation and legal maneuvering. As we walked toward the door, Sabrina made one final attempt at salvaging something from this disaster. "The furniture," she said quickly. "At least let me take the furniture I bought." I paused, considered it for exactly 2 seconds, then shook my head. "The lease agreement you signed, the one you didn't read carefully, states that any improvements or additions to the property become part of the property. You renovated my house with your poor financial choices. Thanks for the upgrades, I guess." We stepped outside into the sunshine, leaving Sabrina standing in her former sanctuary, surrounded by pink walls and expensive mistakes. Joe changed the lock one final time, the mechanism clicking into place with the finality of a judge's gavel. Linda handed me the complete set of keys. And just like that, the house was mine again, or as I like to call it now, poetic real estate. Justice served with a side of renovations I didn't ask for, but would eventually paint over because pink walls weren't really my style. As we drove away, I looked in the rear view mirror and saw Sabrina standing on the porch, smaller and smaller in the distance. A cautionary tale about underestimating quiet people and overestimating your own cleverness. I didn't feel triumphant or cruel. Just relieved that this chapter was finally closed, locked, and permanently in my rear view mirror where it belonged. So, here's where we are now. A few months after the dust settled and the pink paint finally got covered with something more reasonable, a nice neutral beige that doesn't make me feel like I'm living inside a bottle of Pepto-Bismol. Sabrina lives with her mother again, back in that same house where this whole mess started, sitting in that same kitchen where she and Lorraine plotted my destruction over wine and bad judgment. The irony is so perfect it almost feels scripted, like the universe has a screenwriter with a dark sense of humor and a commitment to poetic justice. I heard through mutual acquaintances because even when you cut someone out of your life, small towns and social circles ensure you still get updates whether you want them or not that she's working retail now. Not that there's anything wrong with retail, but it's a far cry from the luxury lifestyle she thought she was going to fund with my alimony checks. She's splitting rent with Lorraine, driving the same car she complained wasn't good enough years ago, and living a life that's probably more modest than the one she had when we were married. The house she thought she'd won, gone. The alimony she practiced crying for non-existent. The sympathy from friends who watched her social media meltdown evaporated like morning dew under harsh sunlight. Her mother, from what I understand, isn't doing much bragging at Bridge Club these days. Apparently, Linda and Carol have some pointed opinions about people who raise their daughters to be gold diggers and schemers. And small town gossip has a way of sticking to people like gum on a shoe. Lorraine went from being the proud mother of a woman taking what she deserved to being the cautionary tale about what happens when you encourage your kid to be morally bankrupt. Can't say I feel bad about that. Marcus Tanner, the lawyer with the expensive tie and the ego problem, apparently tried to sue me for withholding information or some nonsense legal argument that probably sounded good in his head, but fell apart the moment anyone with actual legal knowledge looked at it. The case got thrown out faster than Sabrina got evicted, and I heard he had to refund a portion of his fee to her because he based his entire strategy on assumptions instead of actual property research. He still calls me sir when we occasionally cross paths at legal proceedings or around town. Though now it sounds less condescending and more like he's trying to maintain professional dignity after getting thoroughly embarrassed. As for me, I'm doing fine, better than fine, actually. I'm thriving in that quiet, unassuming way that doesn't require social media posts or validation from people who don't matter. I kept the house, obviously, and I've slowly been renovating it back to something that reflects my taste instead of Sabrina's Instagram aesthetic. The white couch she bought got donated because I'm not trying to maintain furniture that looks dirty if you breathe near it. The gold cabinet hardware got replaced with something more practical. That ridiculous chandelier in the bedroom, gone. Sold to someone on Facebook Marketplace who probably has the same questionable taste Sabrina did. I didn't gloat after everything was said and done. I didn't post my own social media victory lap or send Sabrina messages reminding her of what she lost. I didn't tell everyone in town my side of the story or try to further damage her already demolished reputation. I just moved on with my life, which turns out to be the most powerful statement you can make. Because when you actually win, when you come out of a terrible situation, not just intact, but better off, you don't need to convince anyone. Your life speaks for itself. I sat on my couch one evening, the same spot where I used to sit when Sabrina would scroll through her phone ignoring me. And I turned on the TV to watch a game. Just a regular Tuesday night. Nothing special, no drama, no scheming, no recording apps or legal strategies. Just me, my renovated house, and the peaceful silence that comes from not being married to someone who sees you as an ATM with disappointing withdrawal limits. And in that moment, I whispered to nobody in particular, soft men, huh? Because that's the thing people like Sabrina and Lorraine never understand. They confuse kindness with weakness, patience with stupidity, quietness with inability. They see someone who doesn't make a scene or fight over every little thing, and they think that person can't fight at all. They mistake good manners for being a pushover and respect for being a doormat. But some of the most dangerous people you'll ever meet are the ones who smile while you think you're winning. The ones who stay calm while you lose your mind. The ones who let you think you're in control right up until the moment they reveal you never were. People think silence is weakness. That if you're not constantly asserting dominance or making noise or proving yourself, you must not have anything to prove. But silence isn't weakness. Silence is the sound of victory marinated in sarcasm and served ice cold. Silence is what happens when you've already won and don't need to convince anyone because the results speak louder than words ever could. Silence is me sitting in my house, drinking my coffee, living my life. While somewhere across town, my ex-wife is explaining to her mother how she managed to turn a divorce settlement into an eviction notice. I didn't ruin Sabrina's life. Let's be clear about that. I didn't destroy her career, didn't sabotage her relationships, didn't do anything malicious or cruel. I just refused to be the victim she expected me to be. I just protected what was mine and let her face the consequences of her own actions. All I did was hand her a shovel when she said she wanted to dig for gold. And she enthusiastically dug herself into a hole so deep she needed a ladder to see rock bottom. She wanted luxury. She wanted a lifestyle that looked good on Instagram. A marriage that impressed her friends. A husband who made enough money to fund her fantasies without her having to contribute anything except judgment and disappointment. When I couldn't provide that, or more accurately, when I refused to go into debt pretending to be wealthier than I was, she decided to just take it by force through legal manipulation and practice tears. And I gave her a lesson instead. A lesson about reading documents carefully, about not underestimating people, about how karma works in real time when you're dealing with someone who's smarter than you gave them credit for. The best part, her lawyer still calls me sir. Not in that condescending way he did during the signing, but with genuine respect tinged with what I can only assume is lingering embarrassment. Every time I see Marcus around town and he nods at me with that careful politeness, I'm reminded that sometimes the sweetest victories are the ones that keep reminding your opponents they lost. I think about starting that podcast sometimes, Soft Men Don't Play, where I could share stories about strategic thinking and standing up for yourself without being aggressive. But honestly, I don't need to. This whole experience taught me something valuable. That living well really is the best revenge, and that the people who need to learn lessons are usually too busy being bitter to listen to podcasts anyway. So here I am sitting in my house that nobody can take from me. Living a life that's peaceful and dramery, occasionally thinking about that conversation in the kitchen that started this whole saga. He's too soft to fight, they said. And they were wrong. I wasn't too soft to fight. I was just smart enough to let them think they'd already won while I quietly prepared to dominate. Soft men don't play games we're not guaranteed to win. But when we do play, we play for keeps. And as I sit here in the silence of victory, surrounded by beige walls instead of pink ones, drinking tea that I bought with money that's still mine, I can't help but smile because Sabrina wanted a divorce and she got one. She wanted freedom and she got that, too. She just didn't realize that freedom works both ways and that the person she was freeing might have been waiting for permission to stop caring. The shovel was always in her hands. I just let her dig.